right. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Shana Peete, a Livermore resident for the last roughly 9 years, and I've lived in Livermore. I've worked in Livermore. I worship in Livermore. I've attended, well, my kids attend school here. I volunteer. I'm a board member with TVMPA, and I've even taught some school here at University of Phoenix here in Livermore. And I love this community, and I'm really excited to welcome all of you here for our first public safety and policing panel. Hopefully this is the start of some really useful conversation. In the wake of tragic events, the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and all of that happening at the intersection of the pandemic, the people have shown up, and in an effort to bring about dialogue and change on this journey that we're taking to equity, we're inviting all of you to our esteemed panel to talk with us. And in about 2 minutes, we're going to be asking for your responses to questions, a series of questions that we've gathered from the community. And we'll give you each about 2 minutes to address answers for each question, all right? And I would love, instead of reading your bios, which are amazing, I would love to have you state your name, your title, tell us a few tidbits about what it is that you do in that role. And in the wake of all that's been going on, what's your top priority right now? How about we start with Mayor Haubert?
Yes, well, thank you, Shana. Thank you for putting this together, for your time, and for the organizers having put this program together. For all of the attendees, my colleagues on the panel with me, thank you. I am Dublin Mayor David Haubert, been the mayor in Dublin for the last 6 years. Before that, council member for 2 years. And prior to that, a Dublin Unified School Board of Trustees for 10 years. So I've been here elected in the city of Dublin for the last 18 years. As mayor, I would say right now, our number one challenge is to continue to keep our community healthy and safe. That is always one of my number one priorities, to keeping our community safe. I say that as a council member, as the mayor, I'm just one member of the council. I help run the meetings. I coordinate with our city manager frequently, but we have no more power than any other council member, at least in our city form of government. And so I work closely with my colleagues on the city council. Economic development is a huge opportunity for us, or rather a huge part of what we do, besides keeping our community safe, attracting businesses to our community, jobs and economic vitality, and then balancing growth, making sure that we have the recreational facilities and parks, along with new places for people to live, along with places for people to work and go to restaurants and things like that. That's all pre-COVID, right? Right now, it's keeping us safe and healthy. And that's what I'm most focused on. In particular today, for us, it's about how can we safely reopen, given that the Tri-Valley is its own geographic sub-region, and we hope that we can reopen. We're all getting anxious to do that. Businesses are hurting because we're not open, and so that's a big part of what I do focus on today, as well as, of course, having participated in last week's protest demonstrations peacefully, I might add, a huge part of what I hope to accomplish now and am focused on a daily basis.
Thank you very much, and great job sticking within the 2 minutes. I appreciate that. And I will call next on Mayor Marchand.
Okay, very good. We're all back in business?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. Thank you. And once again, Shana, thank you so much for being the mistress of ceremonies here, and certainly appreciate all the tremendous efforts that have gone into producing this program. I am Mayor John Marchand. I'm the mayor of the city of Livermore. I've been mayor for 8.5 years. This is my final year in office. I term out at the end of this year. And there were those that were saying that this was going to be just a victory lap and just I could coast into the sunset. No such luck. Didn't see the worldwide pandemic and certainly didn't see the racial unrest throughout the entire nation. Certainly, I spent my career, I was been 16 years on the council. I spent 6 years as a council member. This is most recently 9 years as mayor. Before that, I spent 15 years on the Zone 7 Water Board, ensuring the safety of the drinking water here, and at the same time spent over 30 years as a water quality chemist, ensuring the safety of the drinking water. So a good part of my career was spent protecting public health, and as with many of my other colleagues, our top priority remains public safety, and we will continue to work for that. Again, seeing the top roles that we have, I listen to the community. I'm out in the community constantly. I am the face of Livermore, and I need to hear from the people of Livermore. As mayor, I'm the chief policy officer and help influence how the city actually operates, where the resources go. Unlike many of our surrounding communities, we don't do parks. We have a separate elected park district. And of course, that figures into a lot of the youth programming because since we don't do parks, we don't do youth programming because they're a separate elected agency. So it makes it a little bit trickier to get the message out, particularly working with the youth. But we work very closely with the school district, the park district, and the city all work together because we understand that we're serving the same constituency and we need to leverage all of our resources to make sure that we provide the maximum amount of benefit as we share the limited resources throughout the region.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we'll turn to Michael Harris. Chief.
Hi, Shana. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hey, thank you for doing this, and thank you to Unify Livermore. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So my name is Michael Harris. I'm the chief of police here in Livermore, and it'll be almost 7 years now coming up in a month or so. Prior to that, so total is about over 30 years in law enforcement. As far as my role as the police chief here, it's a leadership role, and I'm committed to our mission, vision, and values, which are service with honor, protection with purpose. Our vision statement is committed to organizational excellence and community safety. So public safety, crime prevention is really our number one thing. But in order to do that and be effective, we need to have the community's trust. So community engagement, transparency, all of those things, building it into the culture of the police department and building leaders within the police department and pushing that all down into the organization. That's a really high priority of mine. As far as my biggest priority right now, that's where it comes. That comes to the top is community engagement, transparency, listening, learning, and I think we're in a good position right now to do that. So because we have community trust, I believe. I'm really proud of the men and women in the police department, and so. Yeah, that's my biggest priority right now is community engagement, continuing that transparency, and maintaining public trust.
Next, we have Martina Avalos of the PD's office.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. I currently work for the San Francisco Public Defender's Office. I have been a criminal defense attorney for the last 10 years, and I've worked in 4 different counties as a public defender. Solano County, San Bernardino, Monterey, and now San Francisco. But as a private attorney, I also worked in Alameda, Santa Clara, Marin, San Mateo. So basically all of the Bay Area counties. So I have a lot of familiarity with the different agencies that area entails, as well as the Sheriff's Department. Currently, I think in this political climate, my biggest issue right now is something that Mr. Harris touched on, which I think is accountability. And I think focusing on how we can get more accountability and transparency with policing policies, what's being done inside the police offices, but with their officers, what they're doing to ensure that these policies are being followed. That right now, to me, is my number one issue.
Thank you so kindly. Next, Chief Holmes.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Garrett Holmes, and I have the honor of serving as the Chief of Police here in the city of Dublin. And I kind of started off my law enforcement career as a reserve deputy working for free. And I had a great mentor in a retired deputy, Joe Davis, who showed a lot of care and compassion for the community that he served. And that kind of led me down the path into law enforcement. And, you know, here I am 26 years later. Fortunately, I've spent 15 years working here in the city of Dublin at various ranks. Some of the ranks that I cherished the most was being a field training officer, as well as the field training officer sergeant. So I was able to have a good impact on the men and women who were coming up in the organization, making sure that we trained them the right way, gave them the values that we expect here in the city of Dublin. And I think those went a long way. There's still several men and women that I trained personally that work for me now here. And it's great to see them having excelled throughout the years. You know, some of the things that Chief Harris touched on, you know, we're very fortunate here in the city of Dublin that we have a high level of community support. A few years ago, the city had done a satisfaction survey, and the police department, you know, got some very high marks, which I'm very proud of. You know, the safety of our residents and businesses is a high priority for me. During all of the civil unrest that was going on, the Tri-Valley was targeted by hundreds of individuals who were had intentions of coming here and vandalizing and looting our businesses. And I think through the coordinated efforts of the Tri-Valley law enforcement agencies, we were able to deter that criminal activity in our area. Some of the other cities in Alameda County were not as fortunate. You know, the other thing too is we had a peaceful protest here last Monday, and I was very proud of the men and women that facilitated that. You know, we were able to make sure that there was safety for the people who were involved in the protest, as well as the folks that were in the cars and you know had to wait while we set off some roadblocks. So you know, we've also been dealing with the COVID-19.
So we've actually we're over time, but I would like to ask you a bit. I think that's an interesting point that you've raised about our area being targeted by other elements. If I could give you like another 30 seconds, could you speak to that a bit?
Sure. You know, the Tri-Valley law enforcement agencies were, you know, keeping our eye on social media and working with other allied agencies. And we ended up seeing quite a few cars that were coming out here. We were referring to them as scouts. And so we learned that from some of the other agencies that had, for example, Bayfair Mall, where they were looted, as well as Emeryville, and the scouts were coming out and they would relay information via an application or social media to other organized groups that they were working with. We had a group that was 12 cars with a 25-foot box truck that was trying to come into one of our major shopping centers. And unfortunately, we were able to turn them away. Otherwise, you know, we would experience the same damage that a lot of the other communities.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that follow-up.
Sure.
I wanted to just let everyone know that we are expecting Supervisor Haggerty to join us at some point later. I will give him a chance when he comes in to do the same activity that you are all doing. Until that happens, holding the banner for Pleasanton, California, we have Julie Testa.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Unfortunately, our mayor was not available to participate, and our PD made the decision that they wanted to wait until after there's a discussion with our city council before they participated. So I am speaking, I'm Julie Testa, Pleasanton City Council member, speaking solely for myself. So as far as responsibility, role as a city council member, it's representing the citizens in many different ways and forms. We work with our various city commissions, Human Service Commission, Parks and Rec Commission, Parks and Trails Commission, and many others. And but we are the representative of the cities, the citizens. I think I'll just stop with that.
And would you like to speak to your highest priority at this point, or?
Okay, yes, thank you. My highest priority has been a long time priority for me, which is why I wanted to accept the invitation to participate today. For many years, for over a decade, I've been working with and fortunately had a responsive PD that was open to working with me on police policy issues. And my biggest issue is transparency and accountability. We've got a really great PD, but we've had issues in Pleasanton and we can do better. And I'm grateful for the citizens that have come forward recently and supported the effort to do that. So that
I really appreciate you seeing that as a mode of support and not challenge or something to be tamped down. So I really did want to acknowledge those words and thank you for that.
very grateful for it. Yes.
Thank you. So for substantive questions now, I'd like to move into talking about our communities in the Tri-Valley as a whole. And I'm curious if anyone here feels that the agency that you represent, the office that you represent, the position that you represent, can you say that in your department or area or agency that the demographics of the Tri-Valley are represented in the people who are serving alongside you? How about we start with Mayor Marchand?
Yes, you start talking. So you're correct. The demographic of Livermore, we're about 48% Caucasian, we're 30% Hispanic, less than 2% African American. So obviously that is not reflected on the council right now. Throughout the organization, we try to meet that demographic. We could do better, certainly understandable, but we're making an effort. Point I say is that we always, my mantra has always been strive for perfection, settle for excellence. We'll never be perfect, but we can always do better. So we'll continue those efforts to work with our community. One of the things that I point to is our youth commission. We have a wonderful youth commission that is very diverse and they're very active. And I'm looking for them to be more involved with this conversation as we reach out to the community and have this dialogue about how do we address these issues that are extremely important for the health of our community.
And thank you for that. My follow-up was going to be if you felt that representation, having representation in the same demographic breakdown is important. And it sounds like you're saying that it is something that you're striving for in Livermore.
Absolutely. For example, on our council, we're all Caucasian on the council. We have one woman, but we are all very engaged. We continue to work with the community, reach out to the community. Our most important job right now is to listen to the community, to engage a conversation on how we can do better and how we can meet the desires of the community.
And hopefully we'll find that there's space for these new voices when they do present themselves.
Well, if I could just say that during the two protests that I was at last week, to see the number of young people out there was really very exciting for me because I was looking at the next generation of leaders. I'm looking at people that have stepped up for our planning commission. And people that are really interested. So this is something that I'm focused on right now, is how do we grow that next generation of leaders? And that's what's exciting about what I'm seeing right now.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, we'll stay with mayors for this next response. Mayor Haubert.
Yes, well, thank you for the question, and I'll echo my colleague, Mayor Marchand, in that we strive for perfection and settle for excellence and can always do better. I will say that also our actions speak louder than our words. Several years ago, we put it upon our city managers' goals and objectives to hire a more diverse workforce. And so we have indeed done more of that since I've been elected as mayor. You can see that in various leadership roles across our organization, the head of our Parks and Community Services organization, for example. On our city council, we have a diverse city council, 2 women, 1 Latina. In the past, we've had as many as 2 Indian members of the Indian community. Currently, we have 1. We have a member of the LGBTQ community, I think the first in the Tri-Valley. And as I've had my own personal decisions to make, that is recommendations for commissions, that's where I can have my own personal direct influence. Not all of my recommendations are accepted, but the vast majority are. And I'm really pleased that I was able to nominate and have sitting on our commissions members of the Chinese community, additional members of the Indian community, and even on our Health and Human Services Commission, the very first person of special needs, and recognized Shana Costello in our community. He's run for office year after year after year, and just such a great person, a great heart for the community, a great heart for serving. And I was able to make it, but he's in a wheelchair. He's such tremendous physical barriers, but he serves on our Health and Human Services Commission, and I'm very proud of that. So very diverse, commitment to diversity and inclusion, and actions that really back that up.
Thank you for that. I am appreciative of, Mayor Marchand, you offered sort of a breakdown of the city of Livermore. Mayor Haubert, you told us about the different ways that you're including people at all these different levels, and it goes more than just race or gender, and I appreciated that as well. I'm interested to hear, and there may be follow-ups regarding how each of you is seeing ways of making sure that those people are welcomed, they're included and not just seated at the table. So if you wish to add that to your responses going forward.
Let me just say, Sean Costello was on the commission, and they made him the vice chairman of the commission. And one time the commissioner wasn't able to make it, so he got to lead the meeting. So here's an example with a person with severe special needs and physical barriers leading the meeting. And I just have to tell you, that was very special. I'll go one step further. In our community, we had a student with Down syndrome elected prom queen, and that made national news not too long ago in the city of Dublin. I wasn't on the school board at the time; my children were still in school, but I was very proud, and I'm very proud to have laid the foundation for that during my years on the school board. Our schools preach inclusion, and I was so proud of our community and our schools when that happened.
Thank you. Ms. Testa, Councilmember Testa.
So what we have done in Pleasanton, I'm the newest member on our city council, where the mayors of Dublin and Livermore are at the end of their term on the council. I've only been on for a year. And I've been really pleased to see the development of our commissions. That's really where the preparation for future leaders exists. And our commissions are very diverse. Our council is not, but it hasn't been for lack of welcoming anyone. There hasn't been anyone that has stepped forward, but I know that's going to change soon. And I think that the time that many people are spending on the commissions, getting to know the community and the role that leadership requires in the community. I'm sure we're going to be seeing future leaders, a much more diverse palette of future leaders. So,
Thank you. All right, we'll go next to Ms. Avalos.
There was something that I just wanted to touch on, which was that I hear everyone kind of talking about their current demographics. And the first thing that I'm thinking about is, for me personally, I think it's so important not just to consider your demographics when we're talking about diversity, but to also consider, even if you don't have a large population of Black community members, but having Black members represented, having Black police officers, or all the different races kind of represented, because we are, as the mayors both, pointed out, and I think so smartly, is that we're growing leaders. And part of developing effective, compassionate leaders who can make the decisions, and as well as, educating our voters, having them be aware and reducing racism and all the other, kind of things that we want to address, sexism. It's about seeing more. And so it's not just the demographics, but to Ms. Testa's point, Councilmember Testa's point, when you don't have people stepping up, the next step is, how do we encourage people from those communities? How do we empower them? How do we say, we welcome you, please run? How do we seek them out, not just waiting until they do? So I think we need to really say, let's go out into the community and ask people to run. Let's look around and see who are the members of our community that we think would be good in these positions, and say, come forward, be a part of this discussion, have a seat at the table. And I think that's really the next step.
I thoroughly agree and appreciate that. And I feel that, it's not by coincidence or magic that these things happen. We have to put the wheels in motion to bring about these changes that we're saying that we value. So I definitely appreciate that. Mayor Marchand, I see you chomping at the bit. I'll come back around. Is this to this point right here? Okay, go ahead and hit the unmute button. I'll give you like 10 or 15 seconds, Mayor.
Well, you raise an interesting point, Ms. Avalos, because one of the things that we're trying to address in Livermore is that people can live and work here. So we're working very hard to have a wide range of affordable housing, and we're getting some pushback from our community opposing affordable housing. But one of the problems of getting people involved in the community is time. If they're commuting 2 hours each way, they don't have the bandwidth to volunteer more time to the community. So that's why we're working so hard in Livermore to give people the opportunity to live in our community, to work in our community, and at the same time to contribute to the community. So it's a very complex dynamic, and we're working on that every single day.
I appreciate that. I have lived that as a person who got the opportunity to work in Livermore for a short while, only a couple minutes from my home. It did allow me to show up for my community in ways that I was not previously able to when I had to commute 4 hours total each day. So I 100% agree, and hope that as you all are making decisions, you're keeping that lens, whether it's transportation or whether it's schooling or, where these funds are going, that those things will be in the forefront. I would like to get to the police officers, but Councilwoman Testa, 10, 15 seconds.
So I really did. I was remiss in not saying the city and in fact our PD have really done a great job of integrating our workforce and our police department. Honestly, the police department I think is far more diverse than our demographic, and that's been very deliberate. And I would go back to what was said, Ms. Avalos. Again, I think that by reaching out and inviting so many different members of the community to participate on the commissions, it is in fact grooming and welcoming and making people who wouldn't feel comfortable otherwise start to feel more comfortable participating. So I really do believe the community has made that effort. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Chief Holmes, can you tell us about representation on the force in Dublin?
Absolutely. So one of the things with the city of Dublin is they contract their police services through the Alameda County Sheriff's Office. And so the Alameda County Sheriff's Office has gone to great lengths to include people of color, within our organization. And one of the ways that they do that is through our Explorer program. And so the Sheriff's Office jurisdiction over in San Leandro, Castro Valley, unincorporated San Leandro, there's a very high poverty rate over there. And we're able to connect with the children at a very young age and bring them on as a Sheriff's Explorer. And then as they work with us, they get to know us. So it's a great opportunity for community engagement for us. And then when we see these children go through high school and then on to college, we're able to work with them. And if they want to continue, they would elevate to the position of a cadet. And the cadet, the Sheriff's Office actually pays them. They get medical coverage. Many of those families who are in the underprivileged, some of those families, they don't have health care. And so they're given the opportunity to provide health care for their family as they become a member of the Sheriff's Office. And then once they get out of college, then and if they're of age, then we like to recruit them to come and be a sheriff's deputy with us. And so that's kind of a way that we've really integrated ourselves with the community so that we can, build from within and include all those people.
So how successful would you say it's been?
It's been very successful. We've hired, I think just in the last 18 months, we've hired about 7 people from that group that we've brought up through that organization.
So they've gone from Explorer to Cadet, and now you're seeing them on the force.
That's correct.
Thank you. Chief Harris, we'd love to hear about Livermore.
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, diversity is incredibly important in law enforcement. It is so wonderful to have that and to be able to not only try to reflect your community, but we have visitors and we have people that come that don't necessarily live here. And so, it's not about hitting a target or a number. It's just really about trying to get as much diversity as you can. And so we've been working on that. We've been really, and also with female police officers, trying to increase that as well, with that diversity. And we've been very successful, I think, over the last few years with that. We have now 13 female police officers on our staff, and what Chief Holmes said is true about the Explorer program and the Cadet program. That's a wonderful way to bring people in, increase diversity. So yeah, it's really important to us in our recruitment efforts. We really try and go out of our way to do that. We to attract diverse applicants. And so it's one of my top priorities. One of my top priorities as the chief is bringing in the right people, right? And getting the right team on the bus here. And so that's a real high priority for me. And I definitely want the high caliber people, and I don't settle, but I certainly am really, really looking for diversity. It's a very important thing to have.
I appreciate you bringing up the issue of not settling, still expecting excellence, but broad for your view of who should be in service. You have about 10 seconds remaining of your time. Can you speak to that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm looking for character, right? That's what it means. That's so important for policing. And but diversity and coming from a different background, and what happens is we get together and we become family as officers, and we learn more about other cultures and each other. And now we're more open and aware and accepting of everyone. And so it just makes us all better.
Thank you for that. Mayor Haubert, yes.
Yeah, so I reflect on something that was said to me in my early career by a senior executive who was talking about the people on his team. And I was a couple of rungs down on the ladder. And he said, I look for a team, and if I have 2 people on my team that are exactly the same, guess what? And he said, I don't need one of them. That means one can go. I want somebody else that's different than that other person. If I have two people that are exactly the same, I don't need one of them. And so that stuck with me. And that was maybe 25 years ago. And the point being, get people on the team that think differently, bring different perspectives. You just become such a richer team for it. But absolutely echoing Chief Harris's comments, Chief, that it is, you have to have quality. That has to be there. Have to hire the best. And so the best first, and then diverse and included.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to stick with our police chiefs for this next question as it is related. We're talking about diversity. We're talking about inclusiveness, belonging. I would add into the mix, making sure that people feel that they really have a place and can show up authentically and participate in what they do. Are you all offering or requiring, I would say, anti-bias, anti-racism training at your respective police departments? And if you are, is it ongoing? Chief Harris.
Yes, I mean, that's so incredibly important. And we are doing that, and we're doing it above the level that's required. So if you're not familiar, there's a California Peace Officer Standards and Training. It's called POST. It's a commission. It requires certain training of police officers in California. And there is a requirement for implicit bias training, but we've gone above and beyond the requirement. Every member of the department has gone through a full day of implicit bias training and will continue to on an ongoing basis. We've also attended 16 hours of what we call Blue Courage training, which is talking about being a guardian of the community and understanding your role as a police officer. So it's really important. It's those conversations, those real conversations that you start to have when you let your guard down. Don't be so defensive and take things personal and say, okay, let's examine ourselves. Let's look at this. Let's learn. Let's develop some self-awareness and empathy, and become a better person and a better organization and a better community. And so I'm kind of looking forward to that process as we get into the community engagement of this whole issue that we're talking about, and just the empathy and self-awareness that we can gain and learn and improve on. So implicit bias is, it's everybody has it, right? So we're learning that, and so it's really it's always been important, but now more than ever, I think it's just crucial.
And do you feel that, and most of your time has expired, I'll be frank, but do you feel that one day is sufficient? So, I'm seeing you nod your head no.
Yeah.
Going. Take a few moments and tell me.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not something you go and you sit there and now you don't ever have to talk about it or think about it again. But to sit through a full day of it with an instructor, we had come that it is, as an expert in this topic, and to do it in such a way with police officers who could be potentially on the defensive on this, like, hey, we're telling you you're a racist, so you need to sit down and listen to this. So there's this guard, like I talked about. So you got to get through that. So it's just it's a foundational beginning, and then it has to grow from there, and it has to be something that's in your culture, and just and the discussions in small groups and in community groups and that kind of thing.
So last thing I'll ask, and this is going to be no, I'm sorry, but do you feel you have do you have sufficient resources in that area at this time?
Yes. I'm always looking for, what was that?
I said, okay, great.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to move away from the put a pin in it. We may find a way back there, okay? All right, so I did say we were going to go police first, and so I'll ask Garrett Holmes to answer, and then Mayor Haubert, you'll go next.
All right, thank you. I really echo everything that Mike said before me. The training for racial profiling and implicit bias, that all starts out at the academy level. Everybody must be trained on that. They get tested on that. And then as well as when they come into the field training program, all of our field training officers are required to go through a training course for racial profiling and implicit bias. And then all of our officers have continued professional training, which is required by POST, which is the Police Officers Standards Training for the state of California. And that's a requirement that they receive ongoing training. And it's been really great because for a lot of people, like you said, this can be an uncomfortable topic. We've been extremely fortunate that the people that we've contracted with, both internally and externally, have provided a very high level of training that is engaging for all of our officers. And when they come back from their training, they talk about how wonderful an experience it was. And I can really, I can tell a difference that they're all getting a greater understanding of the things that we face each and every day.
You mentioned something that brings me to a follow-up question. Have you ever had an applicant or applicants who did not score well on this training and thereby were not made an offer to serve?
So this is something that takes place in the academy, and so there's a number of learning domains throughout the 6-month academy for police officers, and they have to pass every single section of this. So just like driving, firearms, arrest and control, laws of arrest, and racial and bias-based profiling, all of that is different learning domains that the officers have to accomplish while they're going through that academy. And if they fail in any one of those, then by the post standards, then they're not able to become a police officer. So they do get what's called a remediation. And so if they fail the test, then they have time to spend with the instructor, do some additional studying, and they get a chance to retake that test in order to be successful in that particular learning domain.
Thank you for that response. I'm just going to share with you my thoughts to that. I feel we're going to move on, but I am curious if a person is truly able to process and take on the lessons in what seems like maybe a short time in just the retraining, retesting, and spending future time or additional time with the instructor. But we'll save that for another question another day. Mayor Haubert. We were asking about anti-bias, anti-racism.
Yes, and Shana, let me also, without distracting too much, I want to welcome my colleague from the Alameda County Board of Supervisors, Haggerty. Thank you for being with us, Supervisor. And let me say, Shana, we don't we have diversity training, sexual harassment training for the City Council. I will say that we probably get more of that on the election circuit when we're running for election. And remember, we are elected of the people and by the people and to serve for the people. So we have to have that in order to really get elected. But I have been through this training. It is so important, if anything, just to have a base level of awareness. People that may have implicit bias may very likely not even be aware of it. And so I have had that training, and in my professional role as a educator and my work with the California School Board Association, we are infusing that into the teachings that we give to school board trustees around the state and superintendents of education around the state. But I also like to go back to one thing that Chief Harris mentioned. And that every time you're providing training to an officer, that means that you're paying them to be in training for a time that they're not out on the street. And that drives up the cost of overall service. It's very well worth it, but it costs money. It costs money. You have to have somebody else backfill the officer in their daily duties. It's release time. And so when we hear talks about defunding the police, the unintended consequences, one of the first things that may go would be that type of training. We cannot allow that to happen. So We want to be mindful of how we spend our money. We want to be very careful to spend money in the right areas, and training and around diversity and inclusion training is so important. But also we have payroll to meet. We have service levels to meet. We have people that have a job with workforce protections in place. So all of these things have to be stuck together and hang together and work together. I want to see even more resources perhaps placed in those areas, and I think we can get there.
Thank you for that. And you have said one of the buzzwords that is definitely going to be addressed during this conversation today about defunding. We're going to put a pin in that for now, but we will get back to it. Supervisor Haggerty, if we could at this point, I would like to have you introduce yourself in the same manner that others were called to do so earlier in our time together today. So essentially what I asked was if you would be willing to state your name, your post, maybe 2 or 3 bullet points about what the job is that you do, and then your biggest focus given the state of events, the state of the world right now.
Okay, well, I'm Scott Haggerty. I apologize for coming on late, and I apologize for eating while I got on. I've been going since 9 o'clock this morning. Doesn't sound like much, but I was up much earlier than that, and been on several MTC meetings dealing with transportation, and also doing a ribbon cutting of opening BART down to San Jose and Milpitas today, while being on meetings at the same time. So I appreciate that. You allow me to come on late.
Thank you for being
so is that enough, or?
Well, what's your highest priority now, given?
Well, I mean, since I've been in, I'm 23 and a half years into this, and hold on one second. I can tell you actually rather quickly. Here it is. In 205 days and 20 hours and 5 minutes and 51 seconds, I will be out of office. And I know there's some people on this call that would like to have my job, and good luck to them. So my focus has been transportation since I have gotten onto the Board of Supervisors, working with Mayor Marchand on BART to Livermore, and then maybe pivoting and looking at other projects, but working with the Tri-Valley mayors and the Tri-City mayors, and more importantly, or not more importantly, but as importantly, also on a regional basis, only person to serve as the 2-time chair of MTC. So my focus has been transportation, and that's because when you get elected, you know, your seat will dictate what your community wants you to do, and the lack of transportation options, transit, congestion, things like that have been something that my district has wanted me to focus on. So that's why I focused on that.
Got it. Thank you so much for that response. And we're getting you back up to speed. In case you didn't hear the initial question, I'll go to Ms. Avalos. Am I saying that correctly, by the way? Is it Avalos?
I say Avalos, but other people correct me who are Spanish speakers.
So my mind was in 2 places. So how you say it, Ms. Avalos. Okay, so have you yourself done ABAR training? Do you find it important? Is it a part of your department?
So we do have lots of trainings regarding race, discussions regarding client-centered representation and how important that is. How do we know their communities? How do we get to know their struggles? But I really do appreciate the spirit that I think the chiefs are discussing implicit bias training. But one of the things our office and other offices I've been a part of have discussed is that implicit bias training, some of the studies are coming forward and saying, look, it's not enough. And there's actually kind of a negative reaction to it, and that these one-day trainings leave often management with the feeling that they've addressed a problem. It's done now, checked off the box. We don't have to come back to it. And where it really needs to be an ongoing, everyday check in with yourself. How are you checking in? How are you holding yourself accountable? Who else is holding you accountable? How am I having these discussions? Can I go to my clients and ask them, do you feel like you're being heard? Do you feel like you're being in any way treated unfairly? Do you feel like I see your struggle, hear you? And I think that's where implicit bias training sometimes is taken kind of as a Band-Aid. And the studies are just saying that it's a much deeper problem. And, to the officer's point, post their training is 6 months. And that's their complete training as officers in the beginning. They can go on to take additional classes, DRE trainings, things that makes them more specialized officers. But when we're talking about that initial training, we're talking about how to write reports, how to testify, how to use their weapons, use of force. It's everything, how to identify drugs. And so, I'd be interested to hear from the chiefs how many days are spent on racial issues during post, because typically what I would suspect is that it's probably less than a week, maybe even as much as a day, and that there probably is no specified test on it. And that's not to say that this is anyone, this is not to lay blame. I really do. I hear a lot of, Chief Harris said something I thought was great, character, right? So I hear that these departments really have change and progress in mind, but post is just the tip of the iceberg, right? This is just their very initial officers, and it really needs to be a daily conversation.
I would echo that as well, particularly if, you are an officer or you're serving in the public defender's office or wherever it may be, and these aren't conversations you're having in your daily life. They're not part of your own experience, or your experience might be quite different from the next person, even if you're both having them. So thanks for those words. I would like to next go to Julie Testa. Councilmember, there we go.
I'm afraid I can't speak for the department and on what implicit bias training they have, but I really do believe that they do. And as far as council, that isn't something that we have. We do the requirements of sexual harassment training, and certainly we go to annual conferences, and there are workshops that if I always go to the workshops, and so I've gone to various workshops, but as a council, I don't think we have requirements on that. So that's a discussion we should probably have.
Is that something that you would be willing to bring up in the future to the council, maybe to put on the agenda?
I would absolutely be willing to bring that up. I'm often bringing up requests for things to go on the agenda, often without the success of support, but I keep trying.
That's right. You can do only what you can do, correct?
That's it. Mm-hmm.
And I would like to follow up to ask you about the staff, beyond just the council. Do you know if this is a requirement for staff by chance?
I don't know. And yet I would guess that it is, but I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
Not certain. So again, I would ask, when this is brought up on the agenda, would it be something that you would try to incorporate for not only the council, but maybe for staff as well?
Oh, if it isn't already in existence,
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I really think it probably is. I've had conversations with our city manager where he has expressed the importance of making sure that we have diverse representation in our staff, and that's really been, and with HR in many of our conversations. And I would feel confident that it probably is already being addressed, but I'm going to ask.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So Supervisor Haggerty, I would ask you the same question. Is this something that you have had training that you've had already? And is it something that other supervisors have? Is it required top down?
I do know that at times, and you need to keep in mind, we have almost 10,000 employees. At times there is training, but usually that's in reaction to a problem. I think one of the speakers said something to the fact that, we go through training, which is required by state law, but it's certainly not to the level you're asking about as elected officials. The Board of Supervisors is different. I see one police chief, and he's appointed by the city council. I see another police chief, and he's too is appointed by the city council, but he's actually, I don't know, Garrett, can I just say you're actually a member of the Deputy Sheriff's Association? So our sheriff is elected. He's elected by the people. Dave talks a lot about by the people, for the people. And so our sheriff is elected by the people of Alameda County. And quite frankly, we have some oversight, but it's somewhat measured by state law as to what we can do. For example, we can't control him through the budget process. As far as what kind of training, I point to Garrett because, he is a deputy and he probably knows more about what the sheriff's training involves than I know. Because with so many departments, so many employees, and then our job, we have to really empower our people to make sure they're doing the things that are right. So I'd probably yield the answer to Garrett's answer because they're similar.
Thank you. Now, Supervisor Haggerty, you brought up a good point, and you probably still have another 10 seconds or so if you want to jump in.
Was there a timer on us?
There is. So we're asking that responses stick to about 2 minutes, and you have done fabulously so far. So I'm impressed that even without knowing the constraints, you've been there. But you talked about trainings like this being done in reaction to problems and issues that arise.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's generally accepted that after an issue happens, you're going to spend a lot more resources on the damage control and the repair than the investment and hopefully not having to go down that road in the first place. Do you have anything to say to that?
Oh, I totally agree with you, Shana. There's no argument there. And in fact, I think, the issues of late have really forced us to analyze these things. And going forward, do I think that's the proper way to govern? No, it's not. And we have to have these conversations. I would support training for our employees, but again, 9,000, almost 10,000 employees is going to be very difficult and take a lot of time. But no, I totally support that. And I agree with you because usually when there's some sort of training involved, it came with some sort of lawsuit too.
That's what I imagined. I want to circle back, and this is going to be a pretty quick yes or no, maybe one sentence after the yes or no, please. For Mayor Marchand, for Mayor Haubert, are you willing to ensure that, well, first off, does your full staff have ABAR training? And if not, are you willing to make that a priority? Mayor Marchand?
Okay, so we do have staff training. And let me just back up a little bit, if I may, because I didn't get a chance to talk about the implicit bias training. As was pointed out, all of us go through training on the council. We go through ethics training. We go through harassment training. And I want to focus on a couple of words that Chief Harris said, and that's culture and character. And yes, to Ms. Avalos' point, it's only a day of implicit bias training. Well, and as an example, you can learn how to play baseball in an hour, but to get really good at it and to live it, it takes years. So it's reinforcement. And I think that's the key word here is we talk about that daily reinforcement. And you know what? That starts at the top. It's creating that culture in the organization where every single day it's reinforced about the right things to do. And everybody builds off of each other, and you create that culture of excellence that, as I said, it starts at the top. We live that every single day. And the people in the organization see that, and it transmits itself throughout the organization.
Thank you. Mayor Haubert, is it top to bottom in Dublin?
It is, and I would say that I am willing to look at the level that we have. I know we have some. I want even more. So those are conversations we will have. I will say that as a council, I'm proud that we led out on things like United Against Hate and joined in a program born out of Berkeley. And I stole from my colleague, Mayor Arreguín from the city of Berkeley, and brought it to Dublin. and that we do lead from the top down. But as Mayor Marchand mentioned, it needs to be a day in and day out cultural shift, cultural change. There will be times when we stumble. We need to get right back up and keep going. And there will be times that we just continue to reinforce it day in and day out. It has to be that way in order to make it stick. I love the analogy of learn how to play baseball, but to get really good, you have to practice. So always practicing. And then what you mentioned earlier in the day, Ms. Avalos mentioned it, keeping us accountable. I'm absolutely willing to be held self-accountable, to hold others accountable, and to call it out when it happens. Just realize, again, people will stumble. They have to get back up and they have to head in the right direction.
And I think that's a wonderful thing for all of us to remember. This is these are unprecedented times, and conversation is happening like nothing I've ever witnessed in my life about issues around race, equity, bias, reparations, slavery, legacies of hate, legacies of love, how to leave them, right? And I think it's important for us to know that we are going to make missteps along the way, but we can't let that turn into analysis paralysis. So appreciated. The next question I have is going to pretty well be targeted toward the police departments. And as a result, I think Ms. Avalos might have a good turn on this one as well. But I'm curious, what proportion of police work could and perhaps should be replaced by social services? And that could be, mental health services, addiction services, et cetera. What proportion of police work is encompassed by these things? And do you feel like there's a place for additional support to the police departments in those areas? Chief Holmes, would you like to take that one first?
One of the things that I think police chiefs and police officers throughout the country, we would welcome, crisis intervention teams, social services teams that could help us with, the individuals that we contact on a consistent basis are people that have mental health issues, people that have substance abuse issues, people that are homeless. The police department has kind of been the fallback for those categories for a number of years. And we can go out there and we can take care of it. The police department is a Band-Aid. We're only there for a few minutes interacting with this individual, and then we try to link them up with the services. But so many times there's a gap between the police department and those services, or maybe that person doesn't reach out. And so, I would be welcoming to have all of those groups join us, and let's create a team that we can go out there and we can help these members of the community that really desperately need these services. If we don't do that, and we haven't done that for a long time, as we can all see, the system is failing. And then ultimately, we've seen over and over again some tragic consequences that have taken place because the failure of the system. And we can't throw it all on the police department, but we all have to. The community. I mean, the police. We are the community. We're all in this together, and it's going to take a group effort in order to change the narrative of all this.
So that said, the word defund came up earlier. If some of the funding that is allocated to your department, for example, is reallocated for those types of services, are you okay with that?
No, I'm not, because
Tell me more.
we need all the officers that we have right now. I mean, we have our crime prevention unit where we try to go out and we try to continue to do our community engagement. We have to go out and we have to investigate traffic accidents. We have to take care of the 911 calls that are coming in. We have to investigate the major criminal activity or felonious crimes that are being committed against our citizens. And by cutting any portion of that, one of those legs of the stool is going to fall. And so we need to make sure that that we continue with the funding that we have, and we need to add to it. There's various pots of money from different entities that could, and all these things that I'm talking about, they exist today. They exist today, and we need to make sure that we get those services out, and we need to force them to work with the police departments so we can get out in the community, so we can get these people the help that they need.
Last question, if you could make it 10 seconds or less. What proportion of your work is these other things?
You know, I don't have any specific data that I can share with you today, but a lot of those three areas, mental health, substance abuse, and also homelessness, those we're going to over and over and over again. And generally it's the same people that we're seeing over and over again. So we can do better as a community.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your candor. Chief Harris, would you like to weigh in? Actually, yeah, Chief Harris, go ahead and weigh in.
All right, thank you very much. We would absolutely welcome mental health counselors, CIT trained counselors. We've been working well before this to try and partner and embed them with us. We have two different types of things happening. We have crisis intervention. That's a call right now. It's happening. We got to go de-escalate it and deal with it. And it's just so helpful to have someone with that expertise in that moment, in that situation. But then we've got ongoing daily follow-up with those folks. They need help, and they need people that can get them the next step in the journey and be there for them. And so, we have 2 full-time officers assigned to our homeless liaison and policing unit, and they're a helping hand for our homeless community to get them where they need to be, but hold them accountable at the same time. Compassionate, but hold them accountable. And so we would welcome that. Substance abuse. I mean, absolutely. That's something that we could use too. You look at the different state laws and you took rehabilitation, those kinds of things. I mean, it drives crime. So anything we can do to disrupt that pattern, and it's not. I don't know that's the police's job to do that, but if we do arrest someone, then at least somebody needs to come in at that point and try and disrupt that pattern so it doesn't just keep repeating.
Thank you for that. And I'll ask you that same question. What proportion of your efforts as a force are going towards those sorts of calls?
A huge number of calls. Huge number of calls for that right now in our community. Mental illness, every day, a number of calls on both crisis and then folks that are just living on the street. People know them in our community. You see them, you recognize who they are.
They're of the community. Absolutely.
They're in the community, yeah. And every day we receive them.
So thank you for your response. Before you also respond, Ms. Avalos, I guess I'm hearing from these 2 police chiefs that there is a huge need for supportive services to the community and possibly to the police in carrying out their duties. I also heard loud and clear Chief Holmes say that there's sort of like in the Venn diagram, it makes me think of right there are the same kind of suspects that we're seeing kind of over and over, the usual seeing people that are repeat calls. What is your response to hearing all of this? And what is it that you see in the reality of, on the other side?
So I have the benefit of having body-worn cameras, but I don't have the benefit of necessarily being on the inside of the force. So my perspective obviously is very different. And I think when we look at what the goal or the training is, the mentality of a police officer, it's to police, it's to arrest, it's to investigate. They're trained. And I think it was the training that Chief Harris brought up, Blue Courage. One of the things that's taught, and it's not the only thing, it's about survival. And so when we send these members who are trained a certain way, who have, as Mayor Marchand talked about, lived in a certain culture, and we encourage that culture of being someone who is to uphold the law. When they approach a situation, It's that mindset that they're looking at it with. And often they're looking for a crime. And if you look for it, you're going to potentially find it, or you might not. And so what I'm hearing from both of the chiefs is, let us arrest them. Let's do that. We have to do that. The drug addiction, he's probably got drugs. Maybe he's selling. We arrest him. But intervention comes in after. And what I think the communities are crying out for is before that. Let's not let it get to the court system. We don't have to always approach it. I can't tell you how many homeless people I've represented who've been charged with trespassing or things like, disturbing the peace. And to me, as a defense attorney, I look at that and I think that arrest didn't need to happen. They were homeless. Or I look at somebody who has a drug addiction and they end up in custody and they just had a small amount of drugs. Now, San Francisco, I know everybody's probably going, oh, San Francisco. We are our own island. I've practiced other places. I know we are very much kind of on our own, but it doesn't always have to result in an arrest. And so I think we need to take a step back and think about how we are framing the issue and how the officers are viewing their job. And that really is what I think everybody's crying out for now when we're talking about defund the police. We're talking about not just taking away money. We're saying scratch the mindset, scratch the model. Let's re-envision this. Let's re-envision what your job is. And it's not going to be enough to say, oh, maybe I'll bring a social worker with me. It really has to be an undoing of the mindset that it's us versus them, thin blue line, outlaw versus law. And so we need to start thinking it's all of us, it's our community.
So I think this is at the crux of, Black Lives Matter. It's at the crux of a lot of the protesting we're seeing out in the streets in cities all over the country. I know that this sort of conversation got limited to a few people. So if anyone is itching to jump in, I'll give you about 30 seconds and I'm going to be very strict on that. But before I do, I would like to hear a response from the two police chiefs, 30 seconds each. Are you receptive to what Ms. Avalos has said?
Well, I think that what Ms. Avalos said is incorrect, because the police officers that we have out there, they are trying to give these people and refer them to services on a daily basis. We're not looking to arrest people. Unfortunately, the system, once they get into it, they cannot get the services that they need to get them out of the cycle of homelessness, the cycle of substance abuse, or the cycle of mental health. They're not getting the services that they need. If the police could deal with them one time and they could be helped out by the system, that would be wonderful. But unfortunately, that's not happening. And then that's why we're getting in this continuous cycle.
Chief Harris, what say you?
Okay. So a lot of the times what I think about is, who are our heroes? Who's the role model officer? And I can remember, growing up in law enforcement at a time when it was the officer who made the most arrests, the most felony busts, this, that. And so you see that and that becomes something as an officer that's what you see as the role model. So we need to sort of challenge that. And what we need to do is say, look, it's not about arrest, or there is nothing good or bad about an arrest. It is something that you need to do in your job if the elements are met, and it's something you're doing, but it's not something that you necessarily need to be proud of. I made this arrest. The outcome in the community, what do we want to see? What are we looking to achieve in the community, and how do we best make that happen? And if it's just our presence deterring crime, if it's somehow having counselors engaged with folks that are addicted to drugs, then and getting them before they get arrested, I'm all for it. I'm all for that. We get no bonuses or anything like that, but for that, we want a quality community where people feel safe, and so yeah.
Thank you. So yes, Councilmember Testa, and then Mayor Marchand.
Thank you. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm excited about the movement that's happening. This is why I'm grateful for the discussions that are now being brought forward, because I haven't been able to get my city council to have these discussions. My background is I'm on the board of directors of NAMI, National Alliance of Mental Illness. We have always said that mental health response, 5150s, should be a medical response, not a law enforcement response. The defunding of police departments was confusing to me at first until I started reading it and understanding that really what it's talking about is exactly what I've been working on for so long, so desperate to see happen. And that is the reallocation of some funding, not all, but some, and being able to be used. There is, in fact, a pilot program right now that through the county that I've been asking for Pleasanton to be a part of, where instead of the 5150s being the primary responders being law enforcement, they would be our EMTs that would be trained in the CIT and crisis response. That is so exciting. And Pleasanton has had 3 critical incidents, 3 unarmed men in crisis that have been killed. And a crisis response team that is handled as a medical response would make all the difference in every one of those cases and the future cases. There's so much I would like to say on this, but I am so excited about the conversation that is being talked about. So you asked, Shana, and I want to answer. In Pleasanton, one of our biggest crimes reported is grand theft auto. And last year, I think it was somewhere between 130 to 150 car thefts, right? How many 5150s? I know that number by heart. Every one of our chiefs should know that number. In Pleasanton, I can recite the various years, but they average between 450 to 500 responses a year of 5150s in Pleasanton. Anytime I share that with my community, people are shocked. So reallocation of funding, that funding that is going towards that response, which is one of the greatest responses in our community, if it is then done in a different form where instead of law enforcement, because, you know, I have to say that in my work through NAMI, the thing I hear most from the families who have a loved one in crisis, I work with the families that the worst possible things are happening. And what I hear so often is praise for the Pleasanton Police Department and how compassionate and wonderful they are when they respond to 5150s. That is the majority of those responses. But those 3 families whose loved one are dead, we need to look at it differently. And there's so much to be said for that. I know I've used more than my time.
No. I appreciate your passion. I appreciate what you're saying. I appreciate the statistics you put behind it and the thought you have behind it. So I have no problems with it. Thank you.
Thank you. For me, it's been more than a decade of a conversation, and this movement might actually make something happen. And I do have to give credit that there was just a little bit of movement along that line already. And my city council, one thing I'll criticize an awful lot of things, but we did only a couple months ago allocate funding for a second wave of CIT. Our entire department has been CIT trained, and yet we still had another fatality. So more CIT training, but it goes back to what everyone else has said. It's
the
about
baseball
the
metaphor.
not check the box.
And it's about the baseball metaphor, making it a daily thing. Mayor Marchand, that leads back to you. I would love
Just
30 seconds, but you know.
We'll see how that goes. It has to be both. You know, it's not an and or, it's both, because you can't. And I think the problem is semantics. This idea of defunding the police department. That means the police department goes away and something else comes in. No, you have to have parallels. Because one of the things the U.S. Interagency Commission on Homelessness found that a homeless person costs a community about $100,000 a year, whereas putting them in sustainable housing is about $20,000 a year. So you could say, well, why don't we just have somebody put up that $20,000 for each homeless person, and we can save about $80,000 for each one. It doesn't work that way, because you have to stand up both at the same time. A homeless person goes in and shoplifts at a grocery store. Who do they call? They don't call services. They call the police because a crime was committed. Now, this person is homeless. They have no shelter. They have no food. Is it a crime? They're trying to survive, but we don't have a structure in place to provide those wraparound services. We have been trying to bring a woman who's experiencing homelessness for the last 6 years off of the street. We finally got her into stabilized housing. She left. Well, we've now got her back in, but the key to success is going to be the wraparound services. Is that something that the city can provide? No, it's got to be a larger agent, a larger organization.
I'm part of the Hallelujah Choir to that. I would just add that it does go back to the biases. It goes back to inclusion. It goes back to the belonging. I've worked in an organization that helped people that were working their way out of poverty. If you put them in a housing opportunity, let's say in Milpitas or Fremont, for example, yes, it's a house, but that's not their home. That's not their community. You know, those are the types of factors that we don't always think about when we're doing the X's and O's and the numbers, right? I would like to just clarify, though, I do think people can be put on their heels by the defund language. Mayor Marchand, you said defund would mean that the police go away. I would actually push back. Defund is reallocating funding, and disband is a whole different animal. Disband is we don't want police anymore. So I did want to make that clarification. We have time. We have just a sliver of time left. I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question. Are we in general agreement with that? Oh, Supervisor Haggerty, would you like to jump in?
No, I just want to say, I'm listening to this discussion, and there's so many things I've been writing down while we've been talking. And, first of all, I just want to be really clear that the county is probably one of the most diversity conscious counties in the Bay Area. And in fact, I'm the only white person on that board. I sit with a Chinese woman, 2 African-American men, and a Hispanic. So, we are an extremely diverse board. We're constantly doing work and trying to make sure that we're constantly running studies that tell us if we are being inclusionary and if we are, moving in the right direction. So this county, I'm proud of, to be very honest with you. I was going to talk about what Julie talked about as far as the pilot program with the county. I think, but I just want to say this, and this is just, I got so much I want to say, and 30 seconds is killing me right now.
Do it. This is important.
We have a problem, and really, we sit here with local government, and this problem is beyond them. It's beyond the county. It's a systemic problem within the state and federal government. And what I mean by that is, look, I went to Finland and I went to Norway for the sole purpose of touring jails. And do you know that the longest sentence they have in Norway and Finland is 20 years, and that could be for the most heinous crime, 20 years. And you know why? That gives people hope that they can get out. And they also transition people as they're getting ready to get out, and they get them to where they will be a part of the community. They also, in Norway and Finland, and I forget which one it was, one had 2 juveniles in custody and the other one had 5 juveniles in custody. We need to figure out a way to deal with that, because that's a problem also. We should not be incarcerating our children, and I'm going to say that straight up. There's other ways that we can be dealing with them, okay? Let's see, I'm still going. And then the bigger problem we have outside of, all the structural problems we have above that, but then we look down into the jails, and we are basically turned them into mental health hospitals. And that is not what a jail is. People with mental health should not be in those jails. The sheriff has he has to take them, but the judges are still assigning them into the jail. And then they have problems within the jail because of the mental health people, the issues that maybe they're not getting, treated properly, as far as getting the meds or making sure the meds are taken. And I know my sheriff, I'm proud of my sheriff. I'm going to be really clear. I know he does do what we can. We have a great pharmacy there, but you just can't get the service you need. And then one last thing, Shana, and I apologize, but the board supervisor just allocated a very large amount of money to the jail, and we took a big hit for that. But what people don't understand is almost half of that money is going to mental health services in the jail, but that doesn't want to get talked about. But actually, it's a court order that's making us do that. So, we're trying, but I'm sorry, I just kind of ran through all this. I wish I had more time.
I thank you for, I wasn't sure that you wanted to weigh in, so I thank you for raising your hand. I thank you for putting all of those facts and figures before us. We're going to go to Mayor Haubert next, but before we do, I would just say, I'm hearing what I would interpret as a call for big thinking right now. I feel like I'm hearing you say, we look at our systems right now, we know that they're not doing all the things that we need them to do, or that they can do, or that we should do, that we deserve as citizens, right? Yeah, I like the hand raise. Is anyone on this panel willing to say, I'm ready to reimagine what we're doing, and it might mean restructuring it?
Yeah, so Shana, what I'm hearing is the need for an overhaul, systems change, all encompassing. What I heard Supervisor Haggerty talk about is that we have state legislature that needs to weigh in on law changes. We need judicial reform. We need sentencing reform. We need I'll go back to when I first met Supervisor Haggerty, and one of the things we talked about at that point was juvenile hall, and we talked about books, not bars. And, that was the Ella Baker Center Foundation almost 20 years ago. And Van Jones talking about reducing the number of people young ones that go to juvenile hall. And so indeed, we have the bits and pieces all within our minds, within our reach, within our grasp, within our decision makers. He's right. The Board of Supervisors, great people, great tenure, great diversity, all with great experience. We can put our arms around this and make it happen. But he's also right. We need to include all of those other pieces: the legislature, the judicial, and probation, and juvenile hall, and the schools. I go back to my tenure on the school board and my talk earlier about how we've done a great job of preaching inclusion in our schools. And it all hangs together, and it has to be a complete systems rethink, and not defund anything, but reallocate and rethink. So I love that word rethink, Shana. I'm all in. Can I put 2 hands up for that one?
Vote early, vote often. I believe in that. Yes. So my question is, we can also do a poll by show of hands. Who here is willing to take it back to the city, the county, et cetera, and perhaps start a commission that will lead this conversation?
So I got to answer that question because
Please.
my board is already doing it,
Okay.
but they are debating it. So it was a debate on how they want to do it. One has already left the track, and he's on his way. And there's another one that's trying to catch him. And so, and it's not me. But yeah, they're already looking at doing that.
So how can we, as the voting public, as citizens, show support for that effort? Supervisor Haggerty.
I hate to say this because he's not on the call, but he does represent the Tri-Valley. Get in contact with Supervisor Miley. He's the one that's heading up. He's the one that's already left the gate.
Okay.
He needs a friend.
I feel like he's going to have a few after this call. Councilmember Testa.
So I have been having those conversations with Supervisor Miley for years, and previously with Supervisor Haggerty when he was our supervisor. So Supervisor Miley did do a town hall meeting for Pleasanton last night. Anyway, yes, there's been a lot of discussion already. I've been a part of it. This has been an energy that I've been really pushing that rock up the hill, and that's been a really heavy rock. And with the 200 plus emails that my city council has received in just the last week, it's changed our city council meeting 5 days before the death of George Floyd. I brought forward the need to agendize a discussion on this and agendize discussion on policy change and all the things that had been pent up. And, I felt like we really just need to put this forward, and I could not. There was only one other council member that supported my bringing it forward. I can tell
Would you like
you,
to say who that council member was? Who supported you?
Councilmember Carla Brown supported my request that we bring this forward on our future city council agenda. These issues that before I was elected, I was told one of my big asks is civilian oversight. We didn't get to that, but that's been out of the 21st century policing. I've been an advocate of that 21st century policing document since 2015. And one of the big asks is civilian oversight. I've been told it's never going to happen in my community. This might be the change that helps us to accomplish that.
So I've heard a lot of different voices. I do not want to box out our police department voices here. Gentlemen, what does this conjure up for you hearing this sort of talk now? Is it reasonable? Is it something that puts you on your heels? How are you feeling? Chief Holmes? Chief Holmes?
Yeah, I think I kind of mentioned it earlier, is that we're very fortunate that we have a lot of support of our community. We've really done some extraordinary things. We just had our council meeting this last Tuesday night, and we had some members of the community weigh in, and we are doing everything that we can to continue to engage with the community and to be transparent. So we're going to be adding additional information to our website, coming up with a city report from the police department, which we haven't done previously. All of our crime statistics are on. What's that?
What will that entail?
So we'll put all of our crime statistics on there, and then all of the programs and everything else that we do within the police department. And then as well as the mayor and I will be doing a study session with the community, kind of like a town hall next week, to continue to engage with the community and to kind of check the temperature of what's going on in our community, so that we know what we can do better for our community.
May I ask, are you all willing to share and make more easily accessible budget information with regard to that? Is that what programs entails?
All the budget is done by the city. It's not done by the police department, right? So we get allocated a certain number of funds from the city, and then and primarily the majority of those funds are paying for the staff and the personnel that we have.
And while I understand that, it's not to say that you all will have the impact, but I think if a person is interested enough to go look for your report, this is part of the discussion that keeps coming up time and again. Would you be willing to include that information and make it easily available for people that are seeking the info?
Yeah, there's no secret to what the budget is. Everything, it's all in we just ratified the city but 2-year budget, and all that information is included was in that staff report from the city.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. Chief Harris.
What we're doing in Livermore is going back to council at our next council meeting, which is, I believe, is the 22nd, and we'll have an item on the agenda. And the mayor and all the council members are taking the mayor's pledge. And there's 4 main pillars there that we're going to incorporate into a community engagement, review, oversight. As far as what we're looking to do, we're pretty proud of ourselves. We think we have a great city. We have a lot of support. And so it's not any kind of thing where we think, we're doing poorly, but it's about getting better and pursuing excellence. And so that's what we're trying to do. So we'll take a look at all these policies. So, and policies are important, don't get me wrong, but it's like I said, laws are important too, and people break those, right? So, what's in people's hearts, what's in people's character, how can we change the way people are looking at each other, feeling each other? So those kinds of things are longer term things that we need to continually being engaged in. So we're going to look at developing a program and outreach that's longer term. So we're going to first answer the questions. We've got bombarded with emails about specific policies with regard to use of force. So we're going to answer those. And then we're going to come back with design for a program that's more longer term, that addresses more of the systemic implicit bias issues that are all around us.
Thank you for that commitment. And that will be made publicly readily available, I imagine. Okay. All right, so I would like to end with one final question. if we could try to keep the answers, we'll say 1 minute. All right, so I would like to hear from each of you. How do you see your role playing into repairing past harm? For the communities, for example, Councilmember Testa mentioned the 3 individuals that were killed at the hands of law enforcement. That's a harm to the community. It's a harm to the public trust. How do you see your role in repairing harms like this? And yeah, okay, Supervisor Haggerty.
Look, these are very difficult times, and I mean that sincerely. It's not just a cliche. I was in my board meeting the other day, and we had 2 individuals call, actually 3. As I said earlier, I have an extremely diverse board, and it's not the only time I've ever cried at a board meeting, but it brought tears to my eyes because we had 2 callers call up and refer to my colleagues with the N-word. And then we had another girl call up and talk about gay people. I don't want to shirk this off like this isn't our problem. But I would say we need some national leadership. We need somebody that can help unify this country, and that will perpetuate down. And we're trying to push it up. You know, we're lifting up, and we're doing what we can. And I at the Board of Supervisors, you know, like I said, we've established youth centers. We have 2 great youth centers that are set up. Our sheriff gets a lot of bad raps. You know, he has one of the largest soccer leagues that he established with his budget. He established big farms, which helps people that are incarcerated learn. He has the boxing program that is getting to be national known, in which deputies built the soccer fields, deputies built the boxing rings and all this, all to help the communities. So I'm kind of going off on a tangent. I'm not really answering your question. My point is we need some sort of national dialogue that is coherent and somewhat sympathetic. We need to continue to do the things we're doing within our communities. I think that, you know, the county certainly, we put a lot of money towards mental health services. We put a lot of money towards youth services. I mean, we have a part of our budget, we have a values-based budget based on the values of the community. And we certainly try. I'm sorry, Shana.
No, it's okay. You certainly try to finish that thought.
We certainly try to put the money where the need is. And that's where, you know, if there's mental health issues, but if you ask me, you know, I think every year except for 1 year in the 24 years I've been on the Board of Supervisors, we've had to cut our budget. There's just simply not enough money. And that's the problem. I don't know that I've really answered your question, but I feel like I had to talk about some sort of national dialogue that is coherent, that doesn't increase hate.
Thank you. And thanks for acknowledging that it exists in our Tri-Valley. During this couple of weeks, I cannot tell you how many times I have heard people speaking, people getting their Twitter fingers ready, and saying that there is no problem in the Tri-Valley. There is no problem in America. So I want to acknowledge that first and foremost. Let's go next, Councilmember Testa. So again, I'm asking, how do you see your role in the repairing of harm?
I respectfully disagree with what Supervisor Haggerty was just saying. President Obama last week called out to the nation and said, go to your mayors, go to your city councils. They are responsible for the oversight of local police departments. I've been frustrated because in my city, I haven't been given that authority. I think that we are going to have that discussion. I think it's going to change. I think President Obama was right that we need to, at the local level, we need to have those discussions, review and reform policy, talk about the culture, those difficult conversations, and it's very difficult in repairing harm. And I think there has been harm. I think the families that have lost loved ones, they need to see that we're making the changes to prevent the future events from happening. Transparency and accountability is really, I have asked for reports. I haven't been given access to information. So as a city council member, when I'm not given access to that information, the transparency and accountability is so important.
So I would love to jump in. If you are willing to share, what reports are you not getting access to? How can we help you?
Thank you. I have not been able to, before I was a city council person, all those years, and I'm talking a decade plus, I was asking for information. I was promoting the 21st century, the tenets of the 21st century policing. And I was told that, Julie, we don't need civilian oversight. That's the city council. We already have that. So I got elected. And I said, I'm here. I'm ready to do my job.
Julie, can I just?
Why haven't I been getting reports? And I was told that they made a mistake, that it isn't the city council that is the oversight of the police department. And for the year and a half that I've been on this, I've asked for, I want monthly reports. I want to see the citizen complaints. I want to see the incident reports, and I haven't gotten a single one.
Julie, can I just remind you that
I don't
Obama
legally
is
have
not the
access.
president anymore. He is not the president. He is not the one that's leading the national dialogue. And so I appreciate you can disagree with that's fine, but I just want to point out Obama is not the president. We need the president to step forward.
I hear that. And I guess what I'm hearing also, I don't know that I'm hearing disagreement among you two. I feel like the thing that maybe Councilmember Testa is disagreeing with is that it doesn't have to only be national, but it can start in your backyard as well. Is that fair to say? Yes? Okay, so I mean, I don't want this to be hostile because I hear you saying the same things. We need good leadership at the top, and we need all boots on the ground in our communities. So I want to take it next to, let's go to Mayor Haubert. You're grinning like Testa or a cat. Are you ready for me? What would you say is your role in repairing harm?
Yeah, so I think right now it's a matter of listening to the community. And as Chief Holmes mentioned, we're going to have that community conversation. And it's great that we get to talk as colleagues here, but we need to hear from the community and not just emails that are often cut, copy, paste, but rather listen to people. And I know with COVID, it's going to be hard, but we can do it on Zoom. And when we can get together face to face, we're going to do that. But it's listening to the people and truly understanding. Then I think it's a matter of outlining the next steps. And I hope to be and working on and will be issuing upwards of 10 points that I believe we could be working on together. And it'll be some of the things that are already floating around in emails, but it'll be much broader to include the social justice areas that I mentioned, much broader reform that's needed. And then lastly, we need to take it into action. We need to document and see substantive change. And that is not only change policies and practices, but change of culture, reallocation of things. But we got to do it together. And I want to go back to what Chief Holmes said earlier. We have to do this together. We cannot leave the police officers, the police leadership, the police associations, and unions on the sideline. We have to bring them along with us. And we can't leave the victims and victim rights advocates and social justice reformers that are out there talking about change. We have to bring them together. And so it has to be, and it's not going to be an easy thing. And here I am, I don't know, I don't have the countdown on my clock, but only a few months left in office as mayor. And of course, we might be able to use Supervisor Haggerty's clock for when that might start up again. Who knows? I'm not going to turn this into a campaign speech, but there's a lot of work to be done, more than I'll be able to handle in my term as mayor, and hopefully many more years carrying on his great work on the Board of Supervisors. But Shana, I'm just going to end by saying, and this will probably be my close, thank you again so much for putting this on. Thank you to the chiefs of police, my colleagues, electeds, and Ms. Avalos. This has been just a great step in our journey. Last week, it was very similar with the organizers of the protest in Dublin, the young organizers we had on a Zoom call. Just last night, it was a follow-up to that week ago Facebook discussion. So it is ever evolving, and thank you for this next step in the journey.
Thank you so much, and thanks for standing in it authentically. I appreciate that. Mayor Marchand.
Thank you. And again, thank you for putting this forum together. I think it's a great start. As Chief Harris mentioned, Monday night, we put it on the next agenda to start talking about how we create this community conversation. I have already taken the mayor's pledge, and so we are going to start to review the policies from the police department. And more importantly, we're going to engage the community to learn what those stories are, learn what the harm has been, and then to take that, report that back to the community. And with that information, then we're going to start to review everything that's happened and to ensure that it does not happen again, that it will not happen again. But we have to change people's mindsets. And that's not something that's done quickly. That's something that's going to take years of hard work. But I have committed to start that work, and we will continue to do that here in Livermore.
Thank you so much. And nailed the time. Thank you. Chief Harris.
Okay, yeah, so how do I see my role playing into repairing past harm? I think for me personally, I need to listen to people. I need to empathize. I need to try and be in their shoes and feel their pain. I need to understand that. I need to express my sympathy when appropriate for past harms. And I think as the leader of this organization, at least the police department, I need to expose our staff to other viewpoints and other people who have seen the world in a different way than them and experienced different things than them. And like I said, put our guards down for a minute, just so that we can have that connection and grow. So I would try to do that.
Thank you. Thank you for the very personal answer. Chief Holmes.
First, I'd like to thank Unify Livermore for putting this forum on. I think this has been very valuable for me personally, and it's something that I can take back to the men and women that work for me here at the City of Dublin. Leadership, you got to do it from the front. And the only way you can do that is to set the example for those who are going to follow you. And we need to make sure that we take a look at the past history and the things that we've done wrong. And we need to learn from them so that we don't repeat those mistakes in the future. And one of the things that I demand from all the men and women that work for me is I tell them, you got to go out there every day and you got to be perfect. And I think some of the mayors said that earlier. I'm asking for perfection, and hopefully we hit the mark of excellence. And let's not forget that there's a tremendous amount of men and women out there who are on the front lines of law enforcement, who are protecting our communities, our residents, and our businesses on a daily basis, who are doing a fantastic job. And there's a few folks out there, and when they step out of line, the chiefs and the community, we need to hold them responsible, because we're with the community. We don't want those bad apples in our organization, because it's a reflection on us, on our community, and all of us. And so we need to be cognizant of that this is not an us versus them. This is a community, and this is a community problem, and we're going to fix this together. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Avalos, we're going to have you bring it home for us.
Thank you. And thank you for welcoming me into your community. I know that I'm an outsider. But something I personally get to do as a public defender is very literal in terms of repairing past harm for that one client I'm standing near who might have had their rights violated, who might say that, their story wasn't told correctly. But I think the bigger discussion is more as a community member, that the thing I can do to repair past harm is continue to challenge people. And as a lawyer, that probably is in my nature anyway. But I think we have to both challenge ourselves and challenge each other. And one of the things I hear Councilwoman Testa saying is, I need to challenge my coworkers to help me, to hear. She's had to, go to bat to fight to have her side heard. I hear both of the mayors saying that they need to challenge their voters. But we really do need greater access to information. As a public defender, I don't get use of force reports always. I don't, and I hear sometimes I heard this from Chief Holmes, stats about the arrests. What about everything else? There needs to be more access for the community to these information. But that goes back to one of the things that the mayor said, which is the laws need to be changed. So as an individual, I think we all need to challenge ourselves to show up, to vote, to become aware of these issues, to become aware of the things that we personally can do to increase accountability and transparency. And it becomes crucial that we change the laws. And it becomes crucial that we support the people in these positions who are fighting to get us the information so we can have these discussions. Because we can't talk completely in hypotheticals. We all want these things, but getting our boots on the ground, as you said, it's both top down and bottom up. All of our boots need to be on the ground, and we need that information.
That's right. I just want to extend the most heartfelt thank you to each and every one of you for taking the time today and for offering even extra time beyond what we thought when you saw where the conversation went and you could feel the importance of your voices being heard. I appreciate you heeding the call of your neighbors, of your community, for you to communicate with them and for you to show up. And that's what you've done today. And Unify Livermore intends for this dialogue to continue. We would like to invite you to join us again if you're willing. I welcome you to put your hand up now if you're willing to come back and engage this way again. I hope that we'll be able to do more of this in the future. We'll be able to take this conversation further and see it through to action and to change. I want to thank the Maury Collective for doing all of our production services today. They're basically doing it for a song, and if you've heard my voice, you would know it wasn't worth much. We would welcome people to donate so that we can continue to create content like this and bring people together in conversation. I'd also urge everyone to get onto the Unify Livermore email list, and you can go to unifylivermore.com to sign up. And as Ms. Avalos mentioned, I cannot overstate the importance of showing up individually. I welcome everyone. I challenge everyone. I urge everyone to vote and also to fill out your census forms. Thank you to everyone on today's panel. Oh, Scott Haggerty, are you giving me the thumbs up or is there something else coming? Okay. Thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to continuing with you so that we can create the community that we know we all deserve.